Well, Bob Knight is one of the winningest coaches in college basketball history for Army, Indiana University, and Texas Tech. And he wants you to wipe that smile off your face. In his new book, The Power of Negative Thinking, he says that optimism is your enemy and that success comes from skepticism, worrying, and even shutting up. Something I might need to learn to do once in a while. Bob Knight is...
No, I'm not sure about that. Now, there are some people that I've advised to go to shut-up school occasionally, but I don't think you're one of them. I think you're too sharp for that.
Bob, great to have you here with us on your book. And, you know, I read it last night. I thought there were a lot of parts of it which I agreed with on the keys to success. But before we get into the book itself, why write this book now?
Well, I wanted to. You know, it was something that, like we talk about the will to win. Well, let's eliminate the will to win and think about the will to prepare to win, because the preparation is much more important than the will. That everybody wants to win, but not everybody wants to prepare to win. And so if we were in a game, if you were playing for me as an example, and we got a game, and I would be talking to you about, you know, you have got to hold Jones to under 10 points, or we don't have a chance in this game. So,
well, let's put it actually to where I am now. You know, here in our studio, what would you coach me? How would you coach me to be the best that I can be here in my job?
Well, to begin with, you're awfully good to start with when I take over, you know. But now if it's when you first started, I would want to say, you know, here are some ideas that you really need to look into and see how you fit into these ideas, and never ever forget the fact that when you go on, you have to be prepared. If you're not prepared...
So that's a negative thinking part of it?
I think so. I think you have to... Don't be satisfied with the fact that you have memorized what you want to talk about. I think preparation is so much more important than the will to win. And then it goes on from there into simple things like why. And if you look back, or if I look back on my life, or you, think of all the times that you wish you'd have said no. Just simply say no. And I'm a great believer. I think the word no is the most important word in the English language.
Did you learn from that in your career?
Oh, yeah.
Was there, of course, was there a moment where you wish you had said no?
I wish yeah, there were more than one, believe me. You've got that. Anyhow, that's good. But so now what we can do is I can change no to yes if I should. But if I say yes first, then I get in a real bind if this doesn't work. And now how am I going to get out of this mess I got into?
Right.
But I think that, and then the most important question that you can ask a person is why. You know, I've said to you, you know, I would like for you to do this. You need to tell me why. And once I've said why... Because
that's key, because...
You have a better idea of what we're talking about. And once you've asked why, then I think you know whether you really want to do this or not. And I think we get into things, it can be coaching basketball or life, whatever it might be.
Well, let me apply this to business, because we've got CEOs that watch this program, watch this network. We have politicians, newsmakers, and those people who need to make decisions every day. So if you're advising a CEO, or what do you think is the biggest mistake a CEO makes?
I think, well, one thing I think to start off the bat with that I've mentioned before is never promote anybody on longevity. You know, promote them on accomplishment. Now, longevity has
just because they're there.
It has nothing to do with the next step, the next job. And I think that let's just don't jump into this. You know, what is it that angels fear to trod where others might go? I think being careful is really important. Okay. I think thinking things through. We make a lot of quick decisions. I may make a decision, okay, we're going to press, and all of a sudden we've given up 3 baskets, and now instead of being down 2, we're down 8, because I make a bad decision knowing if I think a moment, this is a hard team for us to press.
Bob, in your career in coaching, how do you think it's changed, or how did it change from the time that you started at Army all the way to Texas Tech?
Well, I'll tell you, my first game was at Princeton. And my high school football coach was a great coach. And I went through all the coaches I'd ever played under in any sport. And we used to say the Lord's Prayer before we went out on the field to play football. And so I thought, well, you know, maybe that's something I should use. Well, we're playing at Princeton in the old Jadwin gym. So I had the kids get down. This was at West Point, and we repeated the Lord's Prayer. And we're going up the steps, and there's an old trainer there for years and years at West Point named Ed Pillings, great guy. Going up the steps, he put his arm around my shoulder, and he said, this is my first game. He said, son, for what it's worth, you and prayer are not a good mix. So we never had a prayer again. That ended. Ended our pregame prayer. You know, and I think that too many times.
Well, what do you think of coaching today?
Well, it's harder than it's ever been.
Okay.
I think because today more parents are involved by far in what their kids do. For every kid that doesn't get to play all the time, there are 2 parents that think that kid is better than anybody else on the team.
Because of the positive thinking?
Sure, I think
so. That's what you're saying?
I think they get an enlarged view of what their kids are actually capable of doing. As a coach, I thought it was really my responsibility to take you and say, okay, now here's where you can really help us. Mm-hmm. But it might not be in shooting. It might be in how good you were defensively. And I might utilize you to come in spots in a game because you're so quick and you're so tough, but you really help us in that regard. And I think that there's so many things today about kids going to the NBA that didn't exist when I was a player years ago. And there are a lot of different things to deal with at every level today with coaching. And that's why I say I think you really have to approach things in a way that you're going to get the best results. And you've got to be careful to do that.
Well, Bob, one of the things in your book that you mentioned and we talked about is that you said, look, in order to win, you basically need to make the fewest number of mistakes on the court. So everybody makes mistakes, though, at some point in their lifetime, of course. For you, what would you say was your biggest mistake, and what did you learn from it?
Well, I think probably the biggest mistake that I might have made doesn't really have to do with the game of basketball. I think that I would have made a mistake if we would have been a pressing team. I think if we would have played a lot of zone defense, that would have been mistakes. But I think one of the mistakes that I made and I look back on is that I probably in a couple of cases stayed somewhere too long, you know, and thinking that, well, you know, everything's going good here. But really when you have a conflict.
You should have left earlier?
Yeah, I think so. And not for any great reason, but just let's start afresh. Let's go again. Let's try to develop something here. Like I enjoyed Texas Tech when I went there. I think in the previous 4 years they had won 14 games against Big 12 opposition, and in our first 4 years we won 35, I think. So I really liked that. And then we get going, and maybe we've reached a pinnacle, and now maybe it's to move on to someplace else. I think you have to be really careful of that in coaching.
Bob, you have in your book, just to wrap up here, you have in your book the 10 Commandments, and you also had Night Nuggets in your book, by the way. But we brought up your 10 Commandments, and you know, which some of them were quite funny. The one that I thought was really quite funny that I referred to earlier was the get a degree from the shut up school. Basically, know when to stop talking, right?
And know when you shouldn't talk. Oh,
Did you have a problem with that?
Well, you know, I really followed that pretty good. You know, I never did talk a whole lot at a press conference. You know, I'd say yes or no, or try to. I think I was.
You knew when not to talk.
Well, I think I was pretty good. Now there may be some other things I wasn't really good at, but going to shut up school never was. There are probably a couple of times when maybe I should have thought about shut up school.
What was your least favorite part of being a coach?
I think the least favorite part was seeing the thing that I liked best. Let me tell you that first of all was making sure that your son got a degree, and that's what I would.
And you did. You graduated then.
Well,
yeah.
Probably more than anybody ever did, and so that was important to me. And then the least favorite part I think was where a kid wasn't quite as good as you thought he was, and so now it becomes a disappointment to the kid.
Not dealing with the press?
Yeah, well, no, just he didn't have the abilities that
No,
you
I'm talking about the media.
No, the media is
media?
easy to deal with.
Yeah?
That's where you know, you get yourself in trouble if you talk too much. and you know, one of a great phrase that's not bad to use is just simply, I don't know.
All right. Bob, great to see you. Thank you so much for stopping by.